Welcome to Midnight Mystic Stories. I noticed a lot of you who are watching and enjoying the content aren't subscribed yet. If you love spine-chilling stories, creepy encounters, and unexplained mysteries, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. It really helps the channel grow and helps us keep bringing more of the content you love. And be sure to comment below where you are tuning in from. Thank you and enjoy the video. I never thought I'd find myself swiping through a dating app on a cold, rainy night. But there I was, wrapped in a blanket on my couch, staring at my phone. My friends had convinced me that Tinder was the way to go if I wanted to meet someone new. They told me that there were great guys out there, and I just had to sift through a few weirdos to find the diamond in the rough. I was skeptical, but boredom got the better of me. As I swiped through faces, I felt a mixture of excitement and dread. Most profiles were the same. Guys flexing in the gym, holding fish they'd caught, or posing with their dogs. It felt like a parade of cliches. Then, I stumbled upon a profile that stood out. His name was Caleb. There was something about his piercing blue eyes and the way he smiled that sent a chill down my spine. He was different, not just another generic dude. His bio was vague but intriguing, mentioning a love for horror movies and a fascination with urban legends. I swiped right without a second thought. The match came through quickly, and before I knew it, we were chatting. The conversation flowed easily. Caleb was charming and funny, weaving in stories about creepy places he'd visited and the thrill of getting lost in the woods at night. He told me about a local spot, an abandoned amusement park rumored to be haunted. I felt a mix of excitement and unease, but something in me was drawn to him, wanting to explore that dark curiosity together. A couple of days passed, and we decided to meet up. Caleb suggested we check out the amusement park, and despite my initial apprehensions, I agreed. There was something exhilarating about the idea of exploring a place filled with ghost stories, especially with someone who seemed to share my sense of adventure. We agreed to meet at dusk, the perfect time for a creepy outing. When the day arrived, the sky was a thick blanket of gray, and the rain had subsided into a light drizzle. I could feel the tension building in my chest as I drove to the park, the headlights of my car cutting through the misty air. The further I got from the city, the more isolated the surroundings felt. I parked at the entrance, and as I stepped out, the chill in the air nipped at my skin. Caleb was already there, leaning against the rusted gate, his silhouette almost ghostly against the fading light. He greeted me with that same disarming smile, and for a moment, I felt an odd sense of safety. We walked into the park together, the crunch of gravel underfoot echoing in the stillness. The remnants of the rides loomed around us, their once vibrant colors now dull and peeling. The Ferris wheel towered overhead, a giant skeleton against the darkening sky. As we ventured deeper, the atmosphere shifted. The air felt heavy, thick with an unsettling silence that swallowed our voices. Caleb pointed out the various attractions, sharing tales of how they had been abandoned after a tragic accident years ago. Each story was laced with detail, and I could see the excitement in his eyes. But I also noticed a flicker of something darker lurking beneath the surface, something that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. We wandered into the funhouse, the mirrors cracked and warped, distorting our reflections. It felt like stepping into another world, one where reality twisted and turned. Caleb seemed to thrive in that eerie environment, and I followed his lead, my heart racing with a mix of thrill and anxiety. The deeper we went, the more I felt as if we were being watched. A shiver ran down my spine, and I could have sworn I heard whispers echoing through the halls, but I brushed it off as my imagination. As we exited the funhouse, the wind picked up, howling through the empty park. I glanced back, and for a brief moment, I thought I saw a figure lurking at the entrance. But when I looked again, it was gone. I felt a wave of unease wash over me, but I didn't want to ruin the moment. I forced a smile and suggested we check out the old carousel, its horses frozen in time, their eyes staring blankly into the void. Caleb seemed unfazed by the ominous vibe. He laughed and started to spin one of the horses, the creaking sound echoing in the desolation. I stood back, watching him, feeling a strange mix of attraction and apprehension. Just then, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from my best friend, asking how the day was going. I shot back a quick reply, but as I typed, I felt a sudden chill. I looked up to find Caleb standing still, his face illuminated by the faint light of my phone. He was staring at something behind me, his expression shifting from playful to serious. Before I could ask what was wrong, Caleb grabbed my wrist, pulling me closer. He whispered that we needed to leave, his voice low and urgent. Confused, I turned to see what had caught his attention, but there was nothing there. Just the dark outline of the park, silent and empty. A knot formed in my stomach, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. As we made our way back, I started to notice things that felt out of place. The way shadows seemed to flicker in the corners of my vision, the whispers that now felt more pronounced, and the sudden chill that wrapped around us like a cold blanket. Caleb kept glancing back, his demeanor shifting from confident to anxious. I felt the tension between us grow, an unspoken fear hanging in the air. Finally, we reached the entrance, but instead of relief, a sense of dread washed over me. The gate was closed. I could have sworn it had been wide open when we entered, but now it loomed shut, the metal bars casting long shadows across the ground. Caleb tugged at the gate, panic creeping into his voice as he realized it wouldn't budge. I started to feel trapped, my heart racing as I looked around, trying to find another way out. Caleb's breathing quickened, and I caught a glimpse of something in his eyes, a fear that mirrored my own. It dawned on me that we weren't alone. The whispers grew louder, swirling around us like a storm. I turned to see figures emerging from the shadows, their faces obscured but their intentions clear. The panic set in fully as I realized there were too many to count, and they were all focused on us. My instincts screamed to run, but there was nowhere to go. In the chaos, I grabbed Caleb's arm, and we bolted toward a nearby building, hoping to find a way out. The door creaked open, and we stumbled inside, slamming it shut behind us. Heart racing, I leaned against the door, gasping for breath, but Caleb was silent beside me. I turned to look at him, ready to ask what we were going to do next, but my voice caught in my throat. His expression had changed completely. The fear was gone, replaced by something cold and calculating. It was as if a mask had slipped, revealing a twisted smile beneath. I took a step back, confusion flooding my mind. "What are you doing?" I managed to whisper, but he just chuckled softly, the sound sending a chill down my spine. "I told you there's something special about this place," he said, his voice smooth and eerie. "I just needed someone to help me finish what I started." Before I could comprehend what he meant, the door rattled violently, and I could hear the voices growing louder outside, merging into a chorus of laughter and whispers. The realization hit me like a brick. Caleb wasn't just interested in urban legends. He was part of something horrifying, something that thrived on fear and darkness. I was the prey in a sick game, and he had lured me here under the guise of a charming date. As the door creaked ominously under the pressure of the crowd outside, I knew I had to find a way out. My heart raced as I turned to look for an escape route, the weight of betrayal heavy in my chest. The walls seemed to close in, and the whispers grew louder, drowning out any rational thought. I had to act fast before it was too late. I never thought I'd find myself swiping through Tinder late at night, but there I was, alone in my dimly lit apartment, scrolling through profiles like they were the latest Netflix releases. It was a Friday, and the weekend vibe had me feeling a mix of excitement and loneliness. One profile caught my eye, Jake, with a charming smile and a bio that read like a movie script. He was into hiking, photography, and had a few travel pics that made me jealous. It felt like fate when he matched with me almost instantly. I felt that familiar rush of adrenaline, that spark of hope that maybe this would be the night I'd meet someone interesting. We started chatting, and his messages flowed effortlessly. He was funny, engaging, and I could almost hear the laughter in his words. We talked about everything from our favorite movies to the bizarre things that had happened to us on our hikes. There was an intensity to our conversation that felt electric, but if I'm being honest, something about it made me uneasy. Maybe it was the way he seemed to know just the right thing to say, or how he subtly shifted the conversation to darker topics, ghost stories, urban legends, the kind of stuff that makes you glance over your shoulder. Around midnight, Jake suggested we meet up. I hesitated. My gut was telling me it was too soon, but my curiosity was stronger. He offered to pick me up, which felt a bit old-fashioned but also a little unnerving. I told myself I was being ridiculous. I was a 25-year-old woman. I could handle myself. And besides, I was tired of being cooped up in my apartment. When he arrived, there was an almost eerie calm about him. He drove a sleek black car, the kind that made you feel like you were in a movie. The city lights blurred past as we headed out of town, and I could feel the tension in my chest ease a little with every mile we put between us and the city. We ended up at a secluded park, a place I'd never heard of, surrounded by towering trees that seemed to close in around us. There was something disconcerting about it, but I pushed that feeling aside. Jake led me down a narrow path illuminated by the soft glow of his phone flashlight. The air was thick with the smell of damp earth and the distant sound of rustling leaves. I tried to focus on the beauty of the night, the stars twinkling above like tiny diamonds, but my mind kept wandering back to the stories we had shared. We reached a clearing where the trees opened up, revealing a small pond that mirrored the moonlight. It was stunning, but an unsettling chill crept over me. As we settled down on a fallen log, Jake pulled out his phone again. He suggested we play a game, a sort of truth or dare, but with a horror twist. He started with a dare, challenging me to tell a ghost story. I felt a rush of adrenaline. I had a particularly spooky one about a haunted cabin in the woods. As I began to recount the tale, I noticed Jake's expression shift. His eyes glinted in the low light, and he leaned in closer, his interest palpable. I wrapped up my story, and he clapped lightly, but there was something unsettling in the way he smiled. It felt almost predatory. Then it was my turn to ask him. I thought about it for a moment and decided on a simple question. What was his biggest fear? Instead of answering, he shifted the conversation back to his childhood, weaving in a tale about a friend who had gone missing during a camping trip. The way he described it was vivid and haunting. I felt the hair on the back of my neck stand up as he painted the picture of the dark woods and the frantic search for the boy that ended in tragedy. There was a pause, and then Jake leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. He spoke about the boy's disappearance as if it were a mystery that had never been solved. I could feel the tension rising, and I wanted to laugh off the creepiness of it all, but instead, I found myself captivated yet horrified. As the night wore on, I could see the moon shifting in the sky, and my watch ticked away the minutes, but I lost track of time. The stories grew darker, and Jake seemed to thrive on the tension, his eyes sparkling with a strange intensity. I tried to shake off the feeling that something was off, but each time he spoke, I felt like I was being pulled deeper into his web of tales, each one more disturbing than the last. Eventually, he suggested we explore a little further. I was hesitant, but curiosity got the better of me, and I agreed. He led me down a smaller path, one that looked less traveled. The trees loomed over us, their branches twisting like skeletal fingers. The deeper we went, the more I felt an unease settle in my stomach. After a few minutes, we reached another clearing. This one was darker, and as we stepped into it, I noticed something strange, a makeshift campfire ring, surrounded by old, tattered camping gear. My heart raced as I scanned the area. There was something about it that felt wrong. Jake seemed unfazed, almost excited. He began to talk about the eerie history of the place, how it was rumored to be a site of strange occurrences, a spot where people had vanished without a trace. I tried to laugh it off, to lighten the mood, but the laughter felt forced. I could see his eyes glimmering in the dark, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The shadows danced around us, and I felt an overwhelming urge to leave, to get back to the safety of my car and the city lights. But Jake just kept talking, weaving a tale about a group of friends who had come here years ago and never returned. Suddenly, he stopped mid-sentence, his expression shifting as he turned to face me. There was an intensity in his gaze that felt suffocating. He stepped closer, and the air thickened with tension. My heart raced, and I felt an instinctual urge to back away, but I stood my ground. Before I could process what was happening, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small object. My heart dropped as he revealed a weathered old compass, the needle spinning wildly. He explained that it belonged to one of the missing campers, and he had found it while hiking. I felt a chill run down my spine. Why would he bring this here? I wanted to laugh, to dismiss it as a prank, but the atmosphere felt too heavy for jokes. I glanced at the compass again, and then at Jake. There was something in his eyes that made me feel like I was trapped in a nightmare. My instinct screamed at me to run. In a moment of panic, I turned on my heel and started to walk back the way we came. But as I moved, I could hear him behind me, his footsteps echoing in the stillness. I quickened my pace, my heart racing as I stumbled through the underbrush. The trees closed in around me, their silhouettes looming like dark sentinels, and I could hear his voice calling out, teasing, almost mocking. I burst into the clearing where we had first sat, my breath coming in quick gasps. I scanned the area for my car, but it felt like a lifetime had passed since we had arrived. The night felt all-consuming, and I suddenly realized I had no idea which direction we had come from. Panic gripped me as I turned, searching for a familiar path. Just as I started to lose hope, I spotted the faint glow of my car's headlights in the distance. I bolted toward it, adrenaline surging through my veins. I could hear Jake's laughter trailing behind me, and it sent a jolt of terror coursing through me. I reached my car, fumbled with my keys, and finally managed to unlock the door. As I slid into the driver's seat, I glanced back toward the trees. The laughter had stopped, and the night was eerily quiet. I started the engine, my heart pounding as I pulled out onto the road, desperate to put distance between myself and that unsettling clearing. But as I drove, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. Glancing in the rearview mirror, I caught a glimpse of something in the back seat, a shadow, a fleeting movement that made my blood run cold. I turned to look, but there was nothing there. Just my imagination, I told myself. Just the remnants of a terrifying night. The city lights came into view, and I felt a rush of relief. I parked outside my apartment, my heart still racing as I stepped out into the safety of the bustling street. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself, but the unease lingered. I reached for my phone, intending to block Jake, but as I opened the app, a new message appeared. It was from him, sent just a few moments ago. I hope you made it home safe. I'll always know where to find you. The hair on my arm stood up as I stared at the screen, the weight of his words sinking in. I realized then that the stories weren't just tales, they were a warning. I had thought I was the one in control, but I had unknowingly stepped into a game that was all too real. A chill ran down my spine as I glanced around, half expecting to see him lurking in the shadows, waiting for the next opportunity to strike. It was one of those nights when the city felt alive, yet somehow heavy, with a sense of something lurking just beneath the surface. I was scrolling through Tinder, the glow of my phone illuminating my dimly lit apartment, casting eerie shadows on the walls. Swiping left and right, I was just killing time, figuring I might meet someone interesting. But as the clock ticked past midnight, a chill trickled down my spine. The usual thrill of finding a match was replaced with an unsettling feeling, like I was being watched. That's when I came across his profile. Jake. He had this intense gaze in his pictures, deep-set eyes that seemed to pierce right through you. His bio was short and vague, looking for something real. There was something about him that pulled me in, a magnetic energy that felt oddly familiar yet unsettling. I swiped right, and to my surprise, we matched almost immediately. A rush of excitement coursed through me, quickly overshadowed by that nagging feeling in the back of my mind. We started chatting, and Jake was charming. He had this way of making everything feel significant, like every word mattered. I found myself hanging on to his messages, the tension between us palpable even through the screen. He suggested we meet that weekend, a casual coffee at a small cafe tucked away in a neighborhood I rarely ventured into. I agreed, feeling a mix of anticipation and trepidation. The day of our meeting arrived, and I could hardly contain my nerves. I chose my outfit carefully, wanting to make a good impression while also feeling comfortable. As I walked to the cafe, the air was thick with an unsettling stillness, the streets bathed in the golden hue of the setting sun. I arrived early, settling into a corner table, my heart racing as I glanced at the door every few seconds. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. When Jake finally walked in, I felt an inexplicable tension in the air. He looked even more striking in person, but there was something else in his demeanor that made me uneasy. He smiled as he approached, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. We exchanged pleasantries, and as we talked, I noticed little things. The way he seemed overly interested in my background, his questions probing deeper than the surface. It was like he was trying to piece together a puzzle, one I didn't even know existed. The conversation flowed, but I felt increasingly trapped in his gaze. I could feel the weight of his attention, like a spotlight shining down on me. I found myself sharing things I usually kept guarded, my past, my fears, and the loneliness that had been creeping in lately. Jake listened intently, nodding as if he understood every nuance of my experiences. But as he spoke about himself, it felt like he was weaving a narrative that didn't quite add up. There were gaps in his story, moments where he hesitated, and I could sense he was holding something back. As the night wore on, the cafe emptied, leaving just the two of us in a cocoon of dim light and lingering silence. The air grew heavier, the atmosphere thick with unspoken tension. I began to regret my decision to meet him. I excused myself to the restroom, hoping to gather my thoughts. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, and I splashed cold water on my face, trying to shake off the feeling of dread that clung to me. When I returned, Jake was gone. My heart raced as I scanned the room, the empty tables echoing the void he left behind. I considered leaving, but something pulled me back to my seat. Maybe he just stepped out for a moment. I waited, tapping my fingers nervously against the table. But as minutes passed, the unease settled deeper into my bones. I pulled out my phone, half-heartedly scrolling through social media, but my mind was racing. Then, without warning, my phone buzzed. A message from Jake. "I'm outside. Come see." My stomach dropped. I looked around the cafe, the barista cleaning up in the corner, the darkness outside creeping in. I hesitated for a moment, then stood up, my heart pounding as I made my way to the door. Outside, the world felt different. The streets were eerily quiet, the usual buzz of nightlife replaced by a profound silence. I spotted Jake leaning against a lamppost, his silhouette stark against the dim glow. He smiled when he saw me, but there was a strange glint in his eyes, something predatory that made my pulse quicken. As I approached, he reached out, brushing a strand of hair behind my ear, and I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. He leaned in closer, and I caught a whiff of something foul, like decay mixed with the scent of cologne. My instinct screamed at me to run, but curiosity held me in place. He began talking again, his voice low and smooth, but the words twisted in my mind, a jumble of incoherent thoughts that felt like a trap. He spoke of fate, of how we were meant to meet, of connections that transcended the ordinary. The more he spoke, the more I felt like I was slipping into a dream, one where the lines between reality and illusion blurred. Suddenly, he reached for my hand, his grip firm and unyielding. Panic surged through me, and I yanked my hand away, taking a step back. The moment shattered, and I could see the darkness swirl in his eyes, the charming veneer peeling back to reveal something sinister lurking beneath. I turned to leave, but he grabbed my wrist, the pressure of his fingers sending a shock of fear coursing through me. I pulled away harder, adrenaline surging as I sprinted down the street. I heard him calling after me, his voice echoing in the silence, but I didn't look back. I ran until my lungs burned, weaving through the streets, heart racing like a drum in my chest. Finally, I reached the safety of my building, slamming the door shut behind me and locking it tight. I leaned against it, gasping for breath, my mind racing with the night's events. I was safe, but the sense of dread lingered like a cloud. I pulled out my phone, needing to see what Jake was up to, half expecting another message. But instead, I received a notification from Tinder. A new message from Jake. My heart skipped a beat. How did he get my number? I opened it, trembling as I read the words that seemed to crawl off the screen. "You can't escape what's meant to be." Chills raced down my spine. The city outside my window felt claustrophobic, the walls closing in as I tried to process what had happened. I locked my phone, attempting to breathe through the panic rising within me. I needed to calm down, but the night had turned into a waking nightmare, and I was left questioning everything. And then it hit me. I opened my phone again, scrolling back through our conversation. Something wasn't right. I looked closely at his profile picture. The way his smile seemed to twist unnaturally, the shadows playing tricks on my mind. I zoomed in, and my heart stopped. The face staring back at me was not Jake. It was a man I recognized from the news, a notorious criminal who had been wanted for years. My stomach dropped as the pieces of the puzzle fell into place. The horror of the situation crashed over me like a wave, and I realized I had narrowly escaped something far more terrifying than I could have ever imagined. The world outside felt less like a city and more like a trap, and I was caught in its grip with no way out. I was scrolling through Tinder one rainy Friday night, the kind of night that makes you want to curl up with a blanket and a warm drink. But instead, I was buried in my phone, swiping left and right like a skilled magician performing card tricks. After a long week, I was craving some human connection, even if it was just through a screen. That's when I stumbled upon his profile. He looked like he stepped straight out of a movie. Dark hair, piercing blue eyes, and a smile that could light up the dimmest room. His bio was short but intriguing. Adventurers seeking a co-pilot for the wild ride of life. It was cheesy, but it hooked me. I swiped right without a second thought. Within minutes, we matched. His name was Alex, and he wasted no time messaging me. The conversation flowed effortlessly, filled with flirty banter and shared interests. He loved hiking, late-night drives, and horror movies. I was captivated. He had this way of making me feel like we were the only two people in the world, even through the glaring light of my phone screen. As the night wore on, Alex suggested we meet up. My heart raced at the thought. I had never met anyone from an app before, but something about him felt safe, familiar. We decided on a little diner outside of town, a quirky place with neon signs and a retro vibe. It was the perfect setting for our first date, and I could already picture the laughter and easy conversation. The next evening, I pulled up to the diner, my stomach twisting with a mix of excitement and nerves. The rain had turned into a steady drizzle, casting a gray pall over the place. I stepped inside, the bell above the door jingling softly as I entered. The smell of coffee and fried food enveloped me, grounding my jittery nerves. I scanned the room, and there he was, sitting at a booth in the back, looking even better than his pictures. Our conversation was lively, filled with laughter and the occasional nervous glance. I felt a connection growing, an electric spark that made the world outside fade away. He was charming, yet there was something about him that felt just a little off. Maybe it was his intense gaze, or the way he seemed to know too much about me so quickly. But I brushed it aside, chalking it up to my overactive imagination. As the night progressed, he suggested we go for a walk. I hesitated for a moment, but the allure of adventure tugged at me. We strolled through the rain, our footsteps echoing on the deserted streets. The world felt like it belonged to us, and for a brief moment, I forgot about my worries. But then, just as we turned a corner, I felt it. A creeping sensation, like someone was watching us. I glanced around, but the streets were empty. Alex seemed unfazed, his focus entirely on me. I tried to shake off the unease. After all, I was with him, right? But the feeling lingered, gnawing at the corners of my mind. He must have noticed my tension because his demeanor shifted. He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper, as if sharing a secret. He told me about his love for the darker side of life. He described abandoned places, urban legends, and the thrill of exploring the unknown. His words painted vivid pictures in my mind, and I found myself captivated. Yet, there was an underlying intensity in his tone, a fervor that both fascinated and unsettled me. As we wandered deeper into the night, we ended up at an old park. The moonlight cast eerie shadows, and the trees loomed like sentinels, their branches swaying gently in the wind. Alex suggested we explore a nearby abandoned building, claiming it was a hidden gem known only to a select few. My instinct screamed at me to say no, but curiosity got the better of me. We approached the building, an old factory that had long since been forgotten. The entrance was shrouded in darkness, and I hesitated at the threshold. Alex took my hand, and despite my apprehension, I felt a rush of adrenaline as we stepped inside. The air was thick with dust, and the musty smell hit me like a brick wall. We navigated through the crumbling corridors, the sound of our footsteps echoing in the silence. The moonlight filtered through broken windows, casting ghostly patterns on the floor. I felt the tension building, the atmosphere thick with suspense. My heart raced, but I couldn't tell if it was from fear or excitement. As we rounded a corner, we stumbled upon a large, open room. It was filled with remnants of the past, old machinery, rusted tools, and graffiti that told stories of those who had come before us. Alex was in his element, exploring every nook and cranny with an almost childlike wonder. I tried to match his enthusiasm, but every hair on my body stood on end. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from somewhere deeper in the building. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. Alex turned to me, a wild gleam in his eyes, as if he were more excited than scared. I wanted to run, to get out of there, but something held me back. Was it the thrill of the unknown? Or was it the growing realization that I didn't really know this guy at all? He urged me to follow him further into the building, and though every instinct screamed at me to leave, I walked beside him. The deeper we went, the darker it became. The air felt heavy, almost suffocating. Shadows danced along the walls, and I could feel my heart racing with every step. We finally reached a room that looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. Cobwebs hung like curtains, and the floor was littered with broken glass. In the center of the room stood an old, dilapidated chair, its wood splintered and worn. Alex walked toward it, his expression shifting from excitement to something darker. He turned to me, his voice low and intense, as he spoke about the darker side of humanity, the things that lurked in the shadows, waiting for the unsuspecting. I felt a chill run down my spine. This wasn't the fun adventure I had signed up for. I wanted to leave, but my feet felt rooted to the ground. That's when I noticed something out of the corner of my eye. A figure. It stood at the entrance of the room, cloaked in darkness. My blood ran cold. I tried to speak, to warn Alex, but the words caught in my throat. The figure stepped forward, and I could make out a face that sent a wave of terror crashing over me. It was a woman, her eyes hollow and her skin pale. She looked as if she had wandered straight out of a nightmare. Alex didn't seem to notice, his focus still on me, as if he were weaving a spell. I glanced back at the figure, and in that moment, I realized she wasn't alone. More figures emerged from the shadows, each one more ghostly than the last. Panic surged through me, and I finally found my voice. I pulled at Alex's arm, trying to get him to see what was happening, but he remained entranced, lost in his own twisted world. The figures advanced slowly, their hollow eyes fixed on us. I felt my heart racing, a primal urge to run. That's when the unexpected twist hit me, like a freight train. The figures weren't there to harm us. They were drawn to Alex, their eyes filled with a mixture of longing and despair. I looked back at him, and in that moment, I saw something I hadn't noticed before, a dark shadow creeping behind his smile, a connection to the spirits that haunted this place. It all clicked into place. Alex wasn't just a charming adventurer. He was the embodiment of something much darker, a vessel for those who had been lost in the shadows. I pulled away from him, a sense of dread washing over me. The spirits reached out, not to attack, but to reclaim their own. I sprinted back through the building, my heart pounding in my chest as I fumbled through the darkness. The echoes of their whispers followed me, a haunting melody that urged me to stop, to turn back. But I couldn't. I burst out of the building, gasping for fresh air, the rain soaking me to the bone. I glanced back, and in that moment, I saw him standing at the entrance, surrounded by the ghostly figures. He looked like a king among the lost. A sinister grin spread across his face, and I could feel the weight of his presence even from a distance. I got into my car, shaking and breathless, and drove away as fast as I could, the image of him burning into my mind. It wasn't until I got home that I realized I hadn't just escaped a bad day. I had stumbled into something far more sinister. I would never open Tinder again. It was a Friday night, and I was scrolling through Tinder, just looking for something to pass the time. You know how it is, boredom sets in, and suddenly every face on your screen feels like a potential adventure. I stumbled across a profile that caught my eye. His name was Jake, and his pictures were a mix of rugged charm and a hint of mystery. The first photo was him on a mountain, the sunset behind him, casting a golden glow around his shoulders. The next was a close-up of him grinning, eyes twinkling with mischief. He had this vibe that was hard to resist. We matched almost instantly, and the banter flowed easily. He was witty and funny, and within a couple of hours, we were chatting like old friends. But there was something about him that felt slightly off, like a puzzle piece that had been forced into place. He mentioned he lived in a cabin deep in the woods, which I thought was intriguing. I brushed off the unease creeping in. After all, it was just a chat, right? As the night wore on, Jake suggested we meet up. He wanted to take me to his cabin for a bonfire, and despite the red flags waving in my mind, I agreed. Maybe it was the thrill of adventure that swayed me. The idea of a secluded cabin in the woods felt romantic in an eerie sort of way. I texted my friends the details, just in case things went sideways, but I didn't think much of it. I mean, who doesn't want a cute guy's attention, right? When I pulled up to the cabin, my heart raced with anticipation. The place looked like something out of a horror movie, old, wooden, and surrounded by towering trees that seemed to swallow the light. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the ground. I could hear the faint crackling of a fire as I stepped out of my car. Jake appeared from around the corner, his smile wide, and for a moment I felt relieved. We settled around the fire, and he poured me a drink. The conversation flowed easily, filled with laughter and stories. It felt almost magical, until the darkness settled in. The woods around us grew silent, and I could feel the weight of the night pressing down on me. The shadows seemed to stretch and twist, playing tricks on my mind. I shook off the unease and focused on Jake, who was now telling me about his love for nature and the thrill of living off the grid. But then, something in his tone shifted. He started talking about the woods and how they had a life of their own. It was as if he was trying to draw me into a darker narrative. He spoke of strange sounds that echoed through the trees at night, of the things that lurked just beyond the firelight. My heart began to race, not from fear, but from an unsettling mix of intrigue and confusion. I laughed it off, but a part of me wondered if he was trying to scare me on purpose. As the night wore on, I felt an inexplicable urge to leave. The atmosphere had thickened, and I could almost feel the weight of unseen eyes watching us. Jake seemed to sense my discomfort and tried to lighten the mood, but it wasn't working. I couldn't shake off the feeling that I was being drawn deeper into something I didn't understand. I excused myself to go to the bathroom, and as I stepped away from the fire, the darkness enveloped me. The trees loomed overhead, and every rustle made me jump. I fumbled my phone out to check the time, the screen illuminating my face in stark contrast to the pitch-black surroundings. The cabin felt miles away, and I could feel my heart hammering in my chest. When I finally found the bathroom, a makeshift structure behind the cabin, I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. But as I turned to head back, I caught sight of something moving in the shadows. My heart raced, and I squinted into the darkness, trying to discern what it was. But the moment I stepped forward, a low growl echoed through the trees. Panic flooded my senses. I sprinted back to the fire, and Jake was waiting with a concerned expression. I didn't want to freak him out, so I tried to play it cool, laughing it off as just my imagination. But I could see a flicker of something in his eyes, a glimmer of satisfaction that sent chills down my spine. As we sat together, the fire crackling in front of us, I noticed something strange. Jake kept glancing over his shoulder into the woods, as if he was expecting something, or someone, to come out. I tried to shake off the feeling, but my instinct screamed at me to leave. At that moment, I heard a soft whispering, barely audible but distinct enough to make me freeze. It felt like it was coming from the trees, calling my name in an eerie, melodic tone. I looked at Jake, but he didn't seem to hear it. He just smiled, but his smile felt different now, almost predatory. I stood up abruptly, my heart pounding. It was time to go. I made up some excuse about having an early morning and grabbed my things. Jake's expression shifted, and for a split second, I saw something dark behind his eyes, something that made my skin crawl. As I turned to leave, he grabbed my wrist, stopping me. There was a sudden tension in the air, thick and suffocating. My mind raced with the possibilities, and I felt trapped. I pulled away, but his grip was surprisingly strong. It was like he didn't want me to leave, like he was holding on to something more than just my arm. I yanked free and sprinted toward my car, adrenaline surging through me. I could hear him calling my name behind me, but I didn't turn around. I threw open the car door and fumbled with the keys, my hands shaking. Just as I turned the ignition, I glanced back at the cabin, and for a fleeting moment, I saw a figure standing in the shadows behind Jake. It was tall and gaunt, its eyes glowing faintly in the darkness. I tore out of the driveway, tires screeching as I sped down the dirt road. My heart raced, and my mind was a whirlwind of confusion and fear. I didn't understand what had just happened. As I drove, I could still feel the weight of those eyes on me, the whispering echoing in my mind. When I finally reached the main road, I pulled over, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I needed to calm down and process everything. I glanced at my phone to text my friends, but then I noticed something. A message from Jake had come through when I was driving. "Did you like my friends?" They were watching the whole time. I felt my stomach drop as the pieces began to click into place. The whispers, the shadows, the feeling of being watched. It wasn't just my imagination. I was caught in something far deeper than a Tinder date gone wrong. I glanced in my rearview mirror, half expecting to see him standing there, but there was only darkness behind me. I turned my phone off and drove away, leaving the woods and whatever had been lurking in them behind me. But even as I put miles between myself and that cabin, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was still being watched, that the woods had claimed another victim, and I had narrowly escaped. I'll never forget the night I swiped right on a picture that seemed too good to be true. The guy in the photo had this tousled hair and an easy smile that made my heart skip a beat. His bio was a mix of humor and mystery, something like, "Let's get lost in the city and find the best taco truck." It was light, fun, and just the right amount of intriguing. I hadn't planned on meeting anyone that night, but there was something about him that pulled me in. Maybe it was the way he looked directly into the camera, as if he was looking straight into my soul. After a few back-and-forth messages, we decided to meet up. My excitement was tinged with a hint of trepidation, but I brushed it off. I chose a popular coffee shop downtown, bright and bustling, a place where I felt safe. The atmosphere was vibrant, with the sounds of espresso machines hissing and laughter floating through the air. I arrived early, my heart racing as I scanned the crowd for his familiar face, the one I'd seen in that perfect Tinder profile. Time passed, and I started to feel a little anxious. I checked my phone, half hoping for a message, but nothing came through. Just as I was about to give up and order a coffee to drown my nerves, I spotted him. He was standing just outside, looking around, and despite the chill in the air, he wore a confident smile that sent a thrill through me. I waved, and he walked over, his stride easy and relaxed. We settled into a booth, and the conversation flowed surprisingly well. He was charming and had a way of making me feel like I was the only person in the room. As we talked, I noticed something strange. Occasionally, he would glance over my shoulder, his eyes darting to the entrance or the window, as if he was searching for someone. I thought maybe he was just nervous, but the way he did it felt a bit off. I shrugged it off, chalking it up to first date jitters. As the minutes turned into hours, I began to feel that initial excitement shift. He told stories that were dark and twisted, tales of urban legends and strange occurrences in the city. It was gripping and kept me on the edge of my seat. But there was a strange intensity in his gaze, a flicker of something unsettling that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. Still, I found myself wanting to hear more. Just when I thought I could shake off the unease, he leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. He spoke of a place, an abandoned building on the outskirts of town, where strange things happened. I felt a thrill of fear and excitement at the same time. His words painted vivid images in my mind, and I could almost see the crumbling walls, the darkness creeping in. It felt like a movie, but in the back of my head, a voice was telling me to be cautious, that maybe I was in over my head. As our date wound down, he suggested we check out that building. I hesitated. The coffee shop was one thing, but an abandoned place in the dead of night? It sent a chill down my spine, but something about his enthusiasm was infectious. I found myself saying yes, even as a small voice in my head screamed for me to run. We drove through the city, the streetlights flickering like fading stars. The excitement of the unknown mixed with dread made my stomach churn. The further we went, the more isolated the roads became, and soon we were surrounded by trees, shadows looming ominously. The car's headlights illuminated a sign that read, "Welcome to the Forgotten District." My heart sank. The building was a hulking mass of brick and broken windows, its presence looming like a ghost from the past. It was darker than I had imagined, the air thick with the smell of damp earth and decay. He parked the car, and we stepped out, the crunch of gravel underfoot echoing in the silence. A shiver ran through me, but he grabbed my hand, and I felt a rush of adrenaline as we approached the entrance. As we stepped inside, the atmosphere shifted dramatically. The air was stale, and the silence was deafening. The moonlight streamed through the shattered windows, casting eerie shadows that danced on the walls. The place felt alive, as if it was breathing, and I could almost hear whispers in the darkness. I glanced at him, and the excitement in his eyes sent a thrill of fear through me. He was in his element, but I was starting to feel trapped. We wandered deeper into the building, exploring rooms filled with remnants of its past, faded photographs, broken furniture, and graffiti that told stories of those who had come before us. It was fascinating but also unsettling. My instinct screamed at me that we should turn back, but I was caught in his spell. It was like I was in a horror movie, and I couldn't look away. Suddenly, he stopped, his expression shifting. He pointed to a door at the end of the hallway, its surface splintered and worn. "This is where the stories happen," he said, his voice low and almost reverent. I felt a rush of anxiety, and my heart raced as he moved toward the door. I hesitated, glancing back at the way we came, the darkness swallowing the light behind us. He opened the door slowly, and the creaking sound echoed like a ghostly wail. Inside was a small room, empty except for a single chair in the center. The air felt heavier, almost suffocating. He stepped in, urging me to follow. As I crossed the threshold, the door slammed shut behind us, and I felt a surge of panic. The atmosphere shifted, becoming charged with something sinister. I turned to him, my voice barely above a whisper, as I asked if we could leave. But he was no longer the charming guy from the coffee shop. His eyes glinted with a strange intensity, and I felt a chill run down my spine. He leaned closer, and I caught a whiff of something foul like rot. My heart pounded as I realized I was trapped, really trapped. He stepped back, a smirk creeping onto his face that made my blood run cold. "You see, this place holds secrets," he said, his voice dripping with an unsettling glee. "And I wanted to share them with you." The wall seemed to close in as I backed away, desperately searching for a way out. My mind raced, and I could feel the weight of fear pressing down on me. Suddenly, there was a loud crash outside, and I froze. The noise echoed, reverberating through the empty building, and my heart raced as I wondered if someone else was out there. He looked momentarily distracted, and I seized the opportunity to bolt for the door. I yanked it open, but he grabbed my wrist, pulling me back with surprising strength. "Don't you want to know?" he hissed, his grin widening. I could see the madness in his eyes, a darkness that sent a wave of terror through me. I struggled against his grip, adrenaline pumping as I fought to break free. Just as I was about to scream, the door swung open again, and a figure stood silhouetted in the moonlight. It was another man, tall and imposing, with a look of disbelief on his face. He shouted something I couldn't hear over the pounding in my chest, and in that moment, I broke free from my captor's grasp. I sprinted past the stranger, my feet pounding against the floor as I raced for the exit. I didn't look back, the chaos behind me fading as I burst out into the night. I didn't stop running until I reached my car, breathless and shaking. I fumbled for my keys, my hands trembling as I unlocked the door and got inside. The headlights illuminated the path ahead, and I sped away, my heart racing. The weight of what had just happened crashed down on me, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I had narrowly escaped something horrific. But as I drove away, I glanced in the rearview mirror, and my blood ran cold. The man from the coffee shop was standing at the entrance of the building, watching me with that same twisted smile, a silhouette against the darkness. I slammed on the gas, my heart pounding in my chest, but the chilling realization settled in. He hadn't been just a stranger. He had been hunting, hunting for someone like me. And the worst part? I knew he'd be waiting for the next unsuspecting soul to swipe right. I never thought I'd find myself scrolling through Tinder late at night, half-heartedly swiping left and right while wrapped in a cocoon of blankets on my couch. My friends had convinced me to give it a shot after a difficult breakup, telling me that it was a great way to meet new people. But honestly, it just felt like a digital wasteland. The same tired profiles, the same cheesy pickup lines. But that night, something caught my eye. Her name was Claire, and her profile picture was striking. Long, dark hair cascaded down her shoulders, framing a face that was both beautiful and slightly haunting. There was an intensity in her eyes that drew me in. Her bio read simply, "Looking for someone real." I felt a twinge of curiosity and swiped right, fully expecting to never hear back. But within moments, my phone buzzed. A match. We started chatting, and she was different from anyone I'd met before. Claire had a way of keeping the conversation flowing, asking questions that dug deeper than the usual small talk. It felt like we were peeling back layers of each other's lives. I shared stories about my childhood, my dreams, and my fears, while she reciprocated with an openness that was refreshing. As the hours passed, I glanced at the clock and realized it was well past midnight. I was exhausted, but I didn't want the conversation to end. Just as I thought about saying goodnight, she sent a message that made my heart race. "Want to meet up? I know a great spot. It'll be fun." For a split second, I hesitated. Meeting someone from an app felt risky. I had read enough horror stories to know that things could go south in an instant. But there was something magnetic about Claire. I found myself typing sure where. She sent me an address that was surprisingly close, just a 20-minute drive. As I pulled up to the location, I felt a sense of unease. The spot turned out to be an old, abandoned park on the outskirts of town. The moon hung low in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the cracked pavement and rusting playground equipment. It looked like a scene from a horror movie, but I couldn't turn back now. I parked my car and stepped out, the chill of the night air wrapping around me like a wet blanket. The only sounds were the rustle of leaves and the distant hoot of an owl. I glanced at my phone, hoping for a message from Claire, and saw a text pop up. "I'm here. Just follow the path." I took a deep breath and started walking, the crunch of gravel under my feet echoing in the stillness. As I walked deeper into the park, the trees loomed overhead like silent sentinels. The atmosphere was thick with tension, and I felt a knot forming in my stomach. After a few minutes, I reached a clearing illuminated by the faint glow of a single street lamp. It flickered sporadically, adding to the unsettling vibe. There was no sign of Claire, but I could feel her presence, as if she were hiding just out of sight, watching me. I texted her, asking where she was, but my message was met with silence. The longer I stood there, the more anxious I became. I decided to wander a bit, hoping to find her. As I moved through the park, I noticed something strange. The playground equipment, which had looked rusty and forgotten, now seemed to glimmer under the moonlight. I could have sworn I saw shadows moving among the swings and slides. I shook my head, trying to dispel the creeping paranoia. Maybe it was just my imagination running wild. But then I heard it, a soft whisper carried on the wind, a voice that felt familiar yet foreign. I froze, straining to hear. It sounded like Claire, but the words were indistinct, almost like a lullaby. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows. My heart raced as I realized it was her. She looked different, though, more ethereal, almost ghostly in the moonlight. "Sorry I'm late," she said, her voice smooth yet unsettling. "I wanted to show you something special." I was taken aback. There was a strange allure about her, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. She beckoned me to follow her deeper into the park, past the playground and into a thicket of trees. The shadows danced around us, and the air felt charged with an electric tension. As we walked, she started to talk about her past, sharing tales of loss and longing. I listened, entranced yet uneasy. There was a sadness in her eyes that hinted at something dark lurking beneath the surface. I asked her about her family, and her demeanor shifted. She became distant, her words tinged with bitterness. "They don't understand me. I'm different." I tried to lighten the mood. But the more we talked, the more I felt like I was being drawn into a web of her emotions. It was intoxicating yet terrifying. The park felt alive, the trees whispering secrets, the ground pulsing beneath our feet. Then, just as I thought I had a grasp on her, she turned abruptly, her expression blank. "Do you believe in destiny?" she asked, her voice eerily calm. I hesitated, unsure of where this was going. Life is a series of choices, but sometimes those choices are made for us. Before I could respond, she started walking faster, almost as if she were being pulled by an unseen force. Panic surged through me, and I rushed after her, calling her name. The shadows around us thickened, wrapping around my legs like tendrils. I could feel the temperature drop, my breath visible in the cold air. Claire led me to an overgrown path, choked with weeds and brambles. As we ventured deeper, I caught glimpses of things hidden in the darkness, faded photographs pinned to trees, each one depicting a different person, each face twisted in an expression of despair. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. This was a graveyard of forgotten souls. I tried to back away, but Claire turned sharply, her eyes glinting with an intensity one had never seen. "You can't leave," she said, her voice low and melodic, yet laced with something sinister. "You're part of this now." The weight of her words settled over me like a shroud. I felt trapped, ensnared in a game I didn't understand. I turned to run, but the path behind me seemed to vanish, swallowed by the darkness. Every direction I looked led me back to her, that haunting smile on her face, as if she had orchestrated this entire encounter. Desperation clawed at my insides as I stumbled through the underbrush, the whispers growing louder, drowning my thoughts. "You chose to come here," they echoed, a chorus of voices blending into one. "You wanted something real." I burst into a clearing, the flickering street lamp now a beacon of hope. I sprinted toward it, but Claire was right behind me, her presence suffocating. I could feel her breath on my neck, an icy caress that sent chills racing down my spine. Just as I reached the light, I turned around to confront her, ready to demand answers. But the clearing was empty. Claire had vanished, leaving me alone in the eerie glow. My heart pounded as I scanned the darkness, searching for any sign of her. Then my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, my hands trembling, and saw a new message from Claire. "You'll always be part of me, even if you run away." I stumbled backward, my heart racing. The shadows shifted around me, and I felt the ground tremble beneath my feet. I was enveloped by a sense of dread, the realization crashing over me. I had walked into a trap, and now I was ensnared in her world, a world where choices didn't exist, only the haunting echoes of those who had come before me. I turned to flee, but the darkness closed in, swallowing me whole. It all started on a Wednesday night when I was scrolling through Tinder, half-heartedly swiping left and right, watching the endless parade of faces flicker by on my screen. I didn't really think I'd find anyone interesting, but something about the profile of a guy named Jake caught my eye. His pictures were well lit, and he looked like the kind of guy I could see myself having a chill night with. He had this friendly smile and a slight hint of mischief in his eyes that intrigued me. I swiped right without giving it much thought, and to my surprise, it was a match. After a few exchanges of friendly banter, we decided to meet up. Jake suggested a small, dimly lit bar downtown, the kind of place that has an eclectic vibe and always seems to have a few regulars who know the bartender by name. I arrived a bit early, my heart racing slightly with the excitement of meeting someone new. The place was cozy, with low-hanging lights and a jukebox playing soft, nostalgic tunes. I settled into a corner booth, the leather cracked but inviting, and ordered a drink. As I waited, I watched people come and go, each absorbed in their own little world. The bar was filled with laughter and clinking glasses, but there was something off about it too. The shadows seemed a bit deeper than usual, and the laughter felt a little too loud, echoing in a way that made me feel vaguely uneasy. I brushed it off, attributing my unease to nerves. When Jake finally arrived, he was even more charming in person. He slid into the booth across from me, and we chatted easily. Time passed quickly, and before I knew it, we were sharing stories and laughing like we'd known each other for ages. It felt natural, almost too good to be true. But every so often, I caught him glancing around the bar, his smile never quite reaching his eyes when he did. I tried to shake off the strange vibe I was getting. Maybe he was just the kind of person who liked to be aware of his surroundings. We moved on from the bar to a nearby park, the moonlight casting an eerie glow on the path ahead. The trees swayed gently in the cool night breeze, and I could hear the distant sounds of the city, but they felt muted, as if the world was holding its breath. Jake suggested we take a stroll, and despite my uneasiness, I found myself enjoying the quiet. We walked for a while, talking about everything and nothing. But there was a shift in the atmosphere, a subtle tension building as the shadows around us deepened. It was as if something was lurking just beyond the edge of the light, waiting. After a while, Jake suddenly stopped and turned to me, his expression serious. He told me about a strange experience he had a few months back, how he'd been followed home one night after a date. The way he described it sent chills down my spine. It was like he was trying to gauge my reaction, and I could feel my heart rate quickening. I laughed it off, trying to lighten the mood, but something in his eyes told me he was dead serious. We continued walking, but I noticed more and more how he kept looking over his shoulder. It was unsettling. I tried to brush it off as paranoia, but the hairs on the back of my neck were standing up. I suggested we head back, and he agreed, but the unease lingered. The park felt different now, like it had transformed into a maze of shadows. As we approached the edge of the park, I noticed a figure lingering near the entrance. They were partially hidden in the shadows, but I could make out a dark hoodie and jeans. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. Jake noticed too and stiffened beside me. The figure seemed to be watching us, and the atmosphere thickened with tension. Jake grabbed my hand, and we quickened our pace. As we walked, I could hear the crunch of gravel beneath our feet, and the sound echoed ominously in the stillness. I glanced back, but the figure had vanished. I thought maybe I had imagined it, but the feeling of being watched wouldn't leave me. We reached a street lamp, and Jake stopped, breathing heavily. He looked around, his face pale. I could see the fear etched in his features, and it frightened me more than anything. He pulled out his phone, checking his messages. I felt like I was in a horror movie, with the main character oblivious to the danger lurking just out of sight. Then, as if on cue, a loud crash echoed from behind us. A dumpster had fallen over, its contents spilling onto the ground. Jake jumped, and I jumped with him, our hearts racing. I laughed nervously, trying to ease the fear creeping in, but the laughter died in my throat as I noticed a figure again, this time standing under the street lamp just a few feet away. I could see their face now, and it sent a chill straight to my core. It was a woman, her expression blank, almost hollow. Her eyes were dark, and there was something unsettling about the way she moved. I felt Jake tense beside me. Before I could even process what was happening, the woman lunged forward. Jake yanked me back, and we ran. We sprinted down the sidewalk, heart pounding, the sound of our footsteps echoing like thunder in the quiet night. I could hear her footsteps behind us, gaining on us. I could feel panic rising in my chest as we turned down an alley, desperate to lose her. The alley was narrow, the smell of garbage and dampness surrounding us like a heavy blanket. We reached a dead end, and Jake turned to face me, his eyes wild with fear. I felt like I was in a nightmare, trapped with no way out. We were cornered. The woman was closing in, her face twisted in a smile that sent chills down my spine. Just as I thought all hope was lost, Jake pulled me behind a dumpster. We crouched low, tried to catch our breath, our hearts racing. I could hear her footsteps slowing down, as if she was searching for us. The tension was palpable, thickening the air around us. And then the unexpected happened. The woman stopped right in front of the dumpster, her shadow looming over us. I held my breath, waiting for the worst. Instead, she reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone, scrolling through it with a distracted look. My heart sank as I realized something. This was no random stalker. She was just waiting for someone. There was a message on her phone, and suddenly, I recognized it. It was Jake's profile picture. My blood ran cold as I processed the situation. Jake had been watching me the whole night, using this encounter to test my reactions, to see how far I would go in a panic. The woman wasn't after us. She was in on it. I looked at him, my mind racing, and the confidence I had felt just hours ago crumbled. I wanted to scream, to run, but I was frozen in place, caught between fear and disbelief. Jake looked at me, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of something darker in his eyes. The charming smile, the stories, everything had been a facade. In that moment, the truth twisted around me like a noose. I was just another game to him, another thrill to chase. The atmosphere shifted, the shadows no longer just a backdrop, but a chilling reminder of the danger I was truly in. As the woman turned to leave, I took my chance. I pushed past Jake and bolted down the alley, the adrenaline surging through my veins. I didn't look back. I just ran, fueled by pure instinct. I could hear Jake call after me, but I didn't stop, not until I reached the main street. I glanced back, my heart racing, and saw him standing there, the street light illuminating his face. He looked different now, his expression unreadable. I could feel the weight of his gaze on me, and I knew I had escaped something far darker than I could have imagined. The city felt alive around me, the sounds of life rushing back in. I didn't stop running until I reached my apartment. I locked the door behind me, my heart still pounding. I took a moment to catch my breath, trying to process everything that had just happened. I opened my phone, heart racing, and there it was. A message from Jake, just a simple text. "You were great. Let's do it again sometime." I stared at the screen, the words chilling me to the bone. As I sat there, the reality of the night washed over me like a cold wave. I had swiped right on a predator, and the horror of it all settled in. I had just moved to a new city, fresh out of college, and the excitement of starting over was intoxicating. I felt like I was ready to take on the world. But let's be real, the world felt a little less inviting when you're alone in a new place. So, like any millennial, I figured I'd download Tinder and see what was out there. The first few swipes were harmless, mostly guys with little more than selfies and cheesy pickup lines. Nothing special. Then I came across him. His profile was simple but intriguing. A couple of well-composed shots, one of him hiking in the mountains and another of him at a coffee shop, deep in thought. His bio was short: adventurer, thinker, and lover of late-night conversations. I don't know what it was, but something about him caught my eye. He looked genuine, and his smile was warm. I swiped right. Within minutes, we matched. I felt a rush of excitement, and we started chatting. His name was Jake, and he seemed really down to earth. We talked about our favorite local spots, shared stories about our lives, and I felt an instant connection. Jake seemed perfect. He had a way of making me feel like I was the only person in the world. After a few days of texting, we decided to meet up. He suggested a little coffee shop tucked away from the busy streets. I liked that. It felt intimate, away from the chaos of the city. The day of our date arrived, and I was a bundle of nerves. I dressed carefully, wanting to make a good impression, but also wanting to be comfortable. The coffee shop was cozy, the kind of place that smelled like freshly brewed coffee and had soft acoustic music playing in the background. As I walked in, I spotted him right away, sitting at a corner table. He looked even better in person. I felt my heart race as I approached him. We exchanged pleasantries, and the conversation flowed easily. I found myself laughing and opening up to him in a way I hadn't expected. But as the night wore on, something shifted. The conversation turned deeper, and he began to talk about his past. He mentioned an old friend who had gone missing a few years back. The way he spoke about it sent a chill up my spine. It was as if he was still haunted by it. I tried to change the subject, but he kept circling back to it, his eyes darkening with every word. It was starting to feel like a horror movie. The atmosphere shifted from cozy to eerie. The soft music seemed to fade, and the warm lighting felt oppressive. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was somehow trapped in this conversation. I wanted to leave but felt compelled to stay, to understand. Time slipped away, and suddenly it was late. I glanced at my phone and realized I had missed several messages from friends. They were checking in, making sure I was okay. I told Jake I should probably head out, but he insisted on walking me to my car. His demeanor had changed. He seemed overly eager, almost desperate. As we walked, I noticed the streets were eerily quiet. The vibrant city I had fallen in love with just days before now felt like an ominous shadow. I tried to shake off the feeling, convincing myself I was being dramatic. Jake kept talking about the things he loved about the city, but the excitement in his voice felt forced. When we finally reached my car, I felt a wave of relief. I turned to him to say goodbye, but he stepped closer, his expression unreadable. I could sense the tension in the air. I thanked him for the evening, and just as I was about to get in my car, he reached out and touched my arm. I froze. His touch felt cold, and I could see a flicker of something dark in his eyes. He leaned in, and I could feel my heart racing. I didn't want to seem rude, but every instinct in my body was screaming at me to get away. I stepped back, trying to maintain a polite smile, but I could feel panic rising. He seemed to sense my discomfort, and his demeanor changed again. He straightened up, a strange calm washing over him. "You know, sometimes the past has a way of catching up with you," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I felt a chill run through me. I quickly got into my car, locking the door. I could see him standing there, his expression unreadable as I started the engine. I wanted to dismiss it as an awkward moment, but something deep inside me felt wrong. I drove home, every shadow on the road making me jump. That night, I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned, replaying the evening in my mind. Was it just nerves? Or was there something truly off about him? I eventually fell into a restless sleep, only to wake up to a notification on my phone. It was a message from Jake. "I had a great time last night. You're special." I felt a mix of relief and dread. I texted back, thanking him but also expressing that I needed some space. I didn't want to ghost him, but I felt uneasy. The next day passed slowly, and I tried to distract myself, but my phone buzzed again, and again, and again. Each message from Jake felt more intense than the last. "You're not like the others. I can't stop thinking about you. We should meet again." I started to worry. It felt obsessive. I decided to block him, hoping that would put an end to it. But then the messages turned from sweet to strange. "You think you can get away from me? You don't know what I'm capable of." Panic set in. I felt like I was in a horror movie, and I was the unsuspecting victim caught in a twisted plot. I tried to put it out of my mind and went out with friends that weekend, hoping to find some comfort in their company. But even in a crowded bar, I felt his presence looming over me. I was constantly looking over my shoulder, half expecting to see him lurking in the shadows. My friends joked about it, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Late that night, as I walked to my car, I was overwhelmed by a sense of dread. I opened the door and jumped in, locking it behind me. My heart raced as I glanced around, convinced he would appear at any moment. I drove home, the streets feeling more deserted than ever. The next morning, I woke up to a knock on my door. My heart sank as I peered through the peephole, my worst fears confirmed. It was Jake, standing there with a smile that felt wrong. I backed away, my mind racing. I had to get away. I packed a bag and decided to stay at a friend's house for a few days. As I drove, I felt a strange mix of fear and relief. I texted my friend, explaining what was going on. She was supportive, telling me I could stay as long as I needed. But that night, as I lay in bed, I heard a noise outside, a soft tapping, almost rhythmic. I felt my heart race as I crept to the window, peering out into the darkness. I could see a figure standing beneath the streetlight, but the light was too dim to make out any features. I squinted, trying to focus, and suddenly the figure turned, and I felt my blood run cold. It was Jake. He was standing there, staring up at the house, a smile plastered on his face. My stomach churned, and I backed away from the window, fear gripping me. I couldn't believe he had found me. I grabbed my phone to call the police, but before I could dial, I heard my friend's voice coming from the living room. I rushed to her, but as I reached the door, I froze. There was another voice, Jake's voice. "Let me in. I just want to talk." My heart raced as I realized he had made it inside. I could hear my friend's hesitant response, a mix of confusion and concern. I rushed to the living room, but as I turned the corner, I was met with an unexpected sight. There he stood, relaxed and casual, as if we were all just friends hanging out. My friend smiled, completely at ease, as if nothing was wrong. "Hey, I'm glad you're here," she said, beaming. "I invited Jake over. He was just telling me how worried he's been about you." In that moment, everything I had feared twisted into a nightmare. The warmth of the room felt suffocating. The laughter echoed like a distant memory. I looked at Jake, and the smile that once felt inviting now sent ice through my veins. My friend continued chatting, oblivious to the tension in the air, while I felt trapped, caught in a web of confusion. The safe haven I had sought had turned into the very thing I had been running from. Jake turned to me, his expression shifting from concern to something darker. "You shouldn't have run away. I was only trying to protect you." The laughter faded, and the room felt heavy with unspoken truths. I realized then that the greatest horror wasn't in the shadows, but in the people we trust. I was no longer sure who was telling the truth or what reality I was living in. I took a step back, my heart pounding. The walls felt like they were closing in as I tried to piece together the chaos. In that instant, I knew one thing for certain. I was not safe, and the nightmare was just beginning. I was scrolling through Tinder one night, half-heartedly swiping left and right, when I came across a profile that caught my attention. Her name was Lily. She had these piercing green eyes and an enigmatic smile that felt like an invitation into some secret world. The bio was brief but intriguing. "Looking for someone who can keep up with my adventures. Bonus points if you're not scared of the dark." I had my fair share of bad dates, but something about her drew me in like a moth to a flame. We matched within minutes, and the conversation flowed effortlessly. I learned she loved hiking and exploring hidden trails, and her sense of humor was sharp and witty. After a few days of chatting, we decided to meet up. She suggested a secluded spot in the woods, a place known for its breathtaking views and eerie atmosphere, especially as dusk approached. It seemed odd, but I felt a thrill at the idea of an adventure. I agreed without hesitation. The day finally arrived, and I found myself driving to the location, a chill creeping in as the sun dipped lower in the sky. The air felt heavy, almost electric. The winding road led me deeper into the woods, the trees thickening around me like a fortress. I parked my car and stepped out, the crunch of leaves beneath my sneakers echoing in the stillness. I had to admit, it was beautiful, but there was something unsettling about the silence. It felt like the forest was holding its breath. As I walked down the trail, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. My heart raced with every rustle of leaves or snap of a twig. I tried to convince myself it was just the nerves of meeting someone new in a secluded area, but the creeping sense of dread was hard to ignore. I pulled out my phone to check the time, the screen illuminating my face in the dim light. She was late, and I couldn't help but feel an unsettling twinge in my gut. Just as I turned to head back, I heard footsteps behind me. I spun around, adrenaline surging through my veins, but there was nothing. The woods felt alive, shadows dancing in the fading light. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to relax. Maybe it was just a deer or some other wildlife. I decided to wait a little longer. Minutes turned into what felt like hours, and just when I was about to leave, I saw her. Lily emerged from the shadows, her silhouette framed by the dying light. She looked different, almost ethereal, hair tousled and wild, eyes glinting with something I couldn't quite place. I felt a wave of relief wash over me, and she approached with that same enigmatic smile. We started hiking deeper into the woods, and her energy was infectious. She spoke animatedly about past adventures, how she loved exploring the unknown. I listened, captivated, but the further we went, the more I noticed the surroundings changing. The path became narrower, twisted, and the trees loomed taller, their branches stretching out like skeletal hands ready to snatch us away. As night fell, an unsettling silence enveloped us. The chirping of crickets faded, and the only sound was the crunch of our footsteps on the leaf-strewn ground. I felt the weight of the darkness pressing in, and my earlier excitement turned to unease. I tried to shake it off, convincing myself it was just the woods playing tricks on my mind. But there was a tension in the air, a palpable feeling that something was off. Lily seemed undeterred, her laughter echoing through the trees, like a haunting melody. She led me to a clearing that opened up to a breathtaking view of the valley below, the moon casting an eerie glow. It was surreal, beautiful, yet I felt an overwhelming urge to leave. I took a step back, and suddenly, she turned serious. Her expression shifted, and it was like the light in her eyes dimmed. She pointed to a massive oak tree, its gnarled branches twisted like fingers clawing at the sky. "That tree has a story," she said, her voice low and almost reverent. "They say it's haunted." I chuckled nervously, trying to lighten the mood, but the look in her eyes made my stomach drop. Without warning, she turned and started walking towards it, her pace quickening. I followed hesitantly, my heartbeat pounding in my ears. As we reached the tree, she placed her hand on the rough bark, her fingers tracing the deep grooves. A shiver ran through me as I felt an unsettling energy radiate from the tree, like it was alive, watching us. Suddenly, she turned to me, her expression fierce. "Do you believe in spirits?" I shrugged, caught off guard by the intensity of her gaze. Before I could answer, she stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "There are things in these woods, things that don't want to be disturbed. They're always watching." The atmosphere shifted, and I felt a chill creep up my spine. I glanced around, the shadows growing thicker, the air heavier. It felt like we were no longer alone, like the woods had awakened. I wanted to laugh it off, but the fear clawed at my insides. Then she abruptly stepped back, her eyes wide with something I couldn't decipher. I turned to follow her gaze and saw a figure lurking in the trees, just beyond the reach of the moonlight. My heart raced as I tried to make out its shape, but it was obscured by shadows. Panic surged through me. I called out, but my voice felt small, swallowed by the oppressive darkness. Lily grabbed my arm, her grip like iron, and pulled me back. "We need to go. Now." I didn't argue. I felt the primal instinct to run taking over. We sprinted down the path, the sound of footsteps echoing behind us, growing louder, closer. The laughter that once filled the air was replaced by our heavy breathing, the panic rising within me. The forest seemed to conspire against us, branches clawing at my clothes, roots tangling around my feet. I could hear the figure gaining on us, its presence looming closer. My mind raced with questions. Who or what was following us? Why had I listened to her? The thrill of adventure had morphed into a nightmare. Just when I thought we were lost, we stumbled into a clearing, the moon illuminating our escape route. But as I turned to look back, the figure was gone. I felt a moment of relief wash over me, but it was short-lived. Lily stood frozen, her face pale, eyes locked on something behind me. I turned slowly, dread pooling in my stomach. There, standing just at the edge of the clearing, was a mirror image of Lily, but her expression was twisted, a sinister smile spreading across her face. Confusion flooded my mind. How was this possible? The real Lily turned to me, panic etched in her features. "Run! It's not me." I didn't need to be told twice. I bolted, adrenaline fueling my flight. The woods blurred around me as I raced towards my car, the sounds of the forest fading into a cacophony of whispers. I could feel the air thickening, the weight of something dark chasing me. Finally, I burst into the parking area, gasping for breath. I fumbled for my keys, my hands shaking as I jumped into the car. I locked the doors, heart pounding as I glanced back at the trail. There was nothing but darkness behind me. I started the engine, relief flooding my chest, but before I could drive away, I caught a glimpse of her again, Lily, standing at the edge of the woods, her eyes filled with a strange longing, the other figure fading into the shadows. A chill ran through me as I realized the truth. The woman I had met was never real. She had lured me into a trap, a chilling reminder that sometimes the darkness holds more than just shadows. I peeled out of the parking lot, the trees closing in behind me, leaving the haunting image of her smile etched into my mind. I drove away, heart racing, knowing I had escaped the woods, but the darkness had followed me home, and I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. I was scrolling through Tinder on a lazy Sunday afternoon, the kind that drags on forever, when I stumbled upon her profile. Her name was Sarah, and her photos were a mix of casual and adventurous. There was one with her hiking up a mountain, another by a campfire, her laughter captured mid-sentence. The captions were clever, sprinkled with emojis that hinted at a fun personality. I swiped right, mostly out of boredom, not expecting much. But to my surprise, we matched almost instantly. We started chatting, and it felt different. Sarah had this way of making everything sound exciting. She told me about her love for the outdoors and shared stories of her late-night adventures. The conversation flowed easily, with her sending voice notes that made me smile. She had a slight rasp in her voice, and I could almost picture her sitting in a cozy corner of a coffee shop. It was easy to lose track of time, and before I knew it, hours had passed. As the sun began to set, casting a warm orange glow through my window, Sarah suggested we meet up for a hike at a local trail. It felt spontaneous, which I liked. I agreed, and as we exchanged details, she told me to meet her at the trailhead at 7. I couldn't shake the excitement that coursed through me, but a nagging sense of caution lingered at the back of my mind. I pushed it aside, thinking it was just the nerves of meeting someone new. When I arrived at the trailhead, the air was cool and crisp. The last rays of sunlight disappeared behind the trees, and the forest loomed before me like a dark, inviting mystery. I parked my car and stepped out, scanning the area for any sign of her. I waited, glancing at my phone, which showed I was 5 minutes late. I sent her a quick text, hoping she was just running behind. I felt a chill creep up my spine as the darkness settled in. The sounds of the forest became more pronounced, each rustle and snap of a twig echoing in the stillness. After 10 minutes, I started to feel uneasy. My heart raced as I looked down the trail, my eyes straining to pierce the gloom. I tried to convince myself that she was just late, but my instincts whispered otherwise. I paced back and forth, debating whether to wait longer or head back to my car. Just as I was about to leave, I heard a faint sound behind me, a soft crunch of leaves. I turned quickly, half expecting to see Sarah, but nothing was there. The air felt heavier, thick with an eerie tension that sent shivers down my spine. I took a deep breath, telling myself it was just my imagination. Maybe she was just lost in thought, or perhaps she had taken a wrong turn. I decided to send her another message, casually asking if she was still on her way. I waited, tapping my foot against the ground, my mind racing with thoughts. A few minutes passed, and then my phone buzzed. I looked down, my heart leaping in anticipation. But it was just a notification from the app, a reminder to keep swiping. Frustrated, I shoved my phone back into my pocket. As I stood there, I became acutely aware of my surroundings. The trees were now dark silhouettes, their branches clawing at the sky. I glanced around, feeling like I was being watched. The forest, which had felt inviting earlier, now seemed oppressive. I took a few steps down the trail, hoping to catch a glimpse of her. Just as I was about to turn back, I heard a voice, soft, echoing through the stillness. It wasn't Sarah's voice, but rather a distant whisper that sent chills racing down my spine. I turned, heart pounding, but again, nothing was there. I was alone, surrounded by the shadows of the trees. I felt a wave of panic wash over me. What was I doing here? I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was just the anxiety of being alone in the dark. I started walking back toward my car, the gravel crunching under my feet, each step feeling like it took forever. Suddenly, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from Sarah. "Hey, sorry I'm late. I got caught in traffic. I'll be there soon. Can't wait to see you." I felt a rush of relief, but it was short-lived. I glanced at my watch. It was already past 8. I wasn't sure if it was wise to wait any longer. Just as I was about to leave, I saw a figure in the distance, stepping out from between the trees. My heart raced as I squinted, trying to make out who it was. The person was tall and seemed to be wearing a hoodie, their face obscured in shadow. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. Was this Sarah? I hesitated, unsure of what to do. The figure stood still, almost as if they were watching me. I called out, hoping it was her, but the figure didn't move. Instead, they raised a hand, pointing toward the forest. My stomach dropped as a wave of dread washed over me. I turned to run, my instinct screaming at me to get out of there, when I heard a voice, low and gravelly. "You shouldn't have come here." I sprinted back to my car, feeling the weight of the darkness pressing in around me. My heart thudded in my chest as I fumbled with my keys, hands shaking. I finally got the door open and jumped inside, locking it behind me. I took a moment to catch my breath, my mind racing. Had that been a prank? Was Sarah in on it? I glanced at my phone, the screen illuminating my terrified face. No new messages. Suddenly, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a video call from Sarah. I hesitated, my finger hovering over the accept button. What if it wasn't her? I took a deep breath and answered, feeling the tension in my chest tighten. The screen came to life, and there she was, her face illuminated by the glow of her phone. "Hey, I'm so sorry I'm late," she said, her voice cheerful and bright. It felt like a weight lifted off my chest. But then I noticed something strange. The background behind her didn't match the forest I was in. It looked like a dimly lit room, shadows dancing on the walls. A chill crept through me as I scanned her face for any sign of deceit. "Where are you?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I'm just at home, getting ready. Are you at the trail?" Something clicked inside me. "You're not at the trail?" I asked, dread pooling in my stomach. She laughed lightly, but it sounded hollow. "No, silly. I told you I got caught in traffic." I felt the blood drain from my face. I glanced out my window, my heart racing as the figure from before loomed in the shadows, watching me. I turned back to the screen, but Sarah's expression had changed. Her smile faded, replaced by something sinister. "You shouldn't have come here," she echoed, her voice now colder. In that moment, I understood. The person I had been talking to was not who they claimed to be. I felt trapped, the weight of the forest pressing in around me. I turned the key in the ignition, praying for the engine to roar to life. I needed to get out, to escape whatever trap I had unwittingly walked into. As the car sputtered, I could see the figure moving closer, their face now partially lit by the headlights. A twisted smile spread across their lips, and my stomach churned. I sped out of the parking lot, leaving behind the darkness and whatever had been waiting for me in the woods. But as I drove, I couldn't shake the feeling that I hadn't just escaped a person. I had stumbled into something much darker, and it was still watching me, lurking just beyond the glow of my taillights. I never thought I'd find myself swiping through Tinder on a random Wednesday night, but there I was, boredom creeping in like a thick fog. The glow from my phone lit up my face in the dim light of my apartment, casting shadows that felt a little too dark. I'd spent way too long scrolling through the same old profiles, each one blurring into the next, when suddenly, there he was. His name was Jake, and his smile pulled me in like a moth to a flame. There was something magnetic about his eyes, deep and inviting, with a glimmer that felt just a bit off, like the last piece of a jigsaw puzzle that doesn't quite fit. But my curiosity got the better of me, and I swiped right. We matched almost immediately. A whirlwind of messages followed, bouncing back and forth like we were old friends. He had this way of making mundane topics sound intriguing, weaving tales that made even his coffee preferences feel dramatic. I was all in, convinced that I'd finally found someone who could keep me on my toes. After a few days, we decided to meet up at a local cafe, a cozy spot with mismatched furniture and a slightly unsettling collection of vintage dolls lining the shelves. The kind of place that feels like it has a secret. The night of our date, I arrived early, the buzz of excitement mixed with a hint of nervousness swirling in my stomach. I settled into a corner table, tapping my foot impatiently as I watched the door. When Jake walked in, it was like the world around me faded. He looked even better in person, tall, with tousled hair and that same charming smile. He made his way over, and we quickly fell into conversation, the world outside melting away. The cozy atmosphere began to feel oddly claustrophobic as the minutes turned into hours. Jake's stories began to shift from funny anecdotes to darker tales that sent a chill through me. He talked about his family, how they had always been a bit strange, living on the edge of town in an old, creaky house that seemed to breathe. He described the woods behind his home, where he'd spend hours exploring, always feeling like something, or someone, was watching him. I laughed it off, but deep down, a thread of unease wove its way into my thoughts. It was entertaining at first, but the more he spoke, the more I felt like I was being drawn into a web. As the night wore on, I started noticing odd things. The way he'd glance over my shoulder, his smile slightly too wide, as if he were expecting something, or someone, to emerge from the shadows. The cafe, once warm and inviting, now felt suffocating. The dolls on the shelves seemed to stare, their eyes following our conversation. I excused myself to the restroom, splashing cold water on my face, trying to shake off the creeping dread that clung to me. When I returned, Jake was gone. My heart raced as I scanned the room, but he was nowhere in sight. I waited for what felt like an eternity, my mind racing with possibilities. Maybe he'd stepped outside for a moment, but the longer I sat there, the more the air thickened with an unsettling tension. I finally decided to leave, stepping into the cool night air, hoping the chill would clear my head. Walking to my car, I glanced at my phone. No messages from Jake. I was about to call it a night when I heard a rustling sound behind me. I turned, heart pounding, half expecting to see him rushing to catch up. Instead, the street was empty, the shadows dancing with the flickering streetlights. I shook my head, convincing myself my mind was playing tricks on me. Driving home, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something wasn't right. My phone buzzed, pulling me from my thoughts. A message from Jake. Sorry, had to step out. Want to meet again. I hesitated, my fingers hovering over the screen. There was a part of me that wanted to say yes, to give him another chance, but another part screamed to run far away. I eventually replied, keeping it casual, suggesting we could chat again later. As soon as I got home, I locked the door behind me, my heart still racing. I tried to shake off the unease, but sleep eluded me. The shadows in my room felt alive, whispering secrets I couldn't quite grasp. The next day, I received another message from Jake. He asked if I wanted to see his family's house, claiming it was a unique experience. My gut twisted at the thought, but curiosity got the better of me. I agreed, the promise of adventure pulling me in. As I drove to the outskirts of town, the trees thickened, closing in around me like a tunnel. The house came into view, an old Victorian that looked like it had been plucked from a horror movie. It loomed over me, its windows dark and foreboding. Jake was waiting outside, grinning as he waved me over. His excitement felt infectious, and I found myself smiling back, even as a shiver ran down my spine. The inside of the house was just as creepy as I expected. Dust hung in the air, and the floor creaked with every step. Jake led me through the rooms, sharing stories that blurred the line between reality and fiction. The walls seemed to lean in, listening to his tales, while the shadows danced in the corners, almost alive. In one room, he stopped, staring at a faded photograph on the wall. It was an old family portrait, and his expression shifted. I could see a flicker of something dark in his eyes, a shadow that made my skin crawl. He turned to me, smiled back in place, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing something crucial. As we moved to the basement, the air grew heavy. The stairs creaked ominously beneath us, and I hesitated at the top, feeling an unnatural chill. Jake urged me on, his enthusiasm almost manic. I stepped down, the dim light barely illuminating the space. The walls were lined with odd trinkets, old toys, and remnants of a lifelong past. A sense of dread washed over me, and I couldn't help but glance back, wondering if I was making a grave mistake. Suddenly, Jake moved closer, a wild look in his eyes. He started explaining how his family had always had a connection to the supernatural, how they communicated with spirits. My heart raced, the atmosphere thickening around us. I felt trapped, like a fly in a web, and I wanted to scream. As he continued, his voice dropped to a whisper, almost conspiratorial, and I realized he was no longer talking about the past. He was speaking directly to me, his words laced with a sinister undertone. Just then, a loud crash echoed from upstairs. I jumped, adrenaline coursing through me. Jake's smile widened, an unsettling glint in his eyes. I felt the walls closing in, the shadows growing darker. Panic surged through me as I turned to run, racing up the stairs, heart pounding in my ears. But as I reached the top, the front door slammed shut with a deafening thud. I was trapped. Jake's laughter echoed behind me, sending a chill down my spine. I whipped around, my breath coming in ragged gasps. He stood at the bottom of the stairs, the shadows wrapping around him like a cloak. His expression had shifted, the warmth replaced by something dark and twisted. The stories were no longer tales, they were a warning. With a surge of adrenaline, I bolted toward the nearest window, desperate to escape. I pushed against the glass, but it wouldn't budge. I turned back to see Jake advancing, his eyes glinting with an intensity that terrified me. I could feel the weight of the house pressing down, the walls pulsing with a life of their own. In that moment, I realized the truth. Jake wasn't just strange. He was part of something far more sinister. The stories he told weren't just family legends. They were a lure, a trap. The house wasn't just old. It was alive, feeding off fear. And I had walked straight into its mouth. With one last desperate effort, I flung myself at the door, managing to pry it open just enough to slip through. I raced into the night, the forest swallowing me whole as I ran. The trees loomed like sentinels, watching as I fled. I didn't stop until I reached my car, fumbling with the keys, barely able to breathe. As I drove away, heart racing and mind spinning, I glanced in the rearview mirror. The house stood silent, but I could have sworn I saw a shadow in the window, watching me leave. I never opened the Tinder app again. The memory of that night etched into my mind. Some doors are better left closed, and some matches are never meant to ignite.